Hello, folks. I'm Kerry Farr. Welcome to today's edition of In Your Corner. In Your Corner is the show that shares interesting stories of men and women who have been knocked down by the circumstances of life but got up and became champions. And we share these so that you can become the champion you were meant to be. Today, one of the great boxers of the 70s and 80s and even 90s, Jerome "Kid" Coffee, joins us. Jerome was an amazing athlete and an amazing boxer. But friends, if you love boxing, call your neighbor, call your friend. You're going to want to listen to Jerome's story today because he has an amazing story, but he knew and personally knows each and every one of those great fighters from those days. Jerome Coffee, so good to have you on In Your Corner.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
Jerome, you know, of course, I've known you for a long time and followed your career because I've lived here in your town, Nashville, Tennessee, back, in the days when you were a young man. How did you get started boxing?
Well, I was in South Nashville, and me and about 8 other kids decided to go to a place that we heard that was doing boxing. And a guy named was Bob Dixon, and he put our gloves on for the first time, and that was probably in 1971, and I've been doing it ever since.
Was that before he had, of course they called him Tricky Dicky, and he was had trained so many guys here local, but was that before he had the boxing gym over there in the fire station on 12th South?
It was indeed. He had a boarding house in the basement, had a boxing gym that he had set up, and we all went down to that boarding house and got started, and it was exciting because he actually put together something that nobody would have ever dreamed it could happen, and turned out a couple of really good fighters.
Oh yeah. Now, how in the world, you were on what most people consider the greatest amateur boxing team in the history of America. Tell us a little bit about those days.
Well, in the mid 70s. There was a gentleman by the name of Clinton Jackson who made the '76 Olympic team, and him and a few other guys, John Tate and out of Knoxville, and those guys, they were setting the way for young guys like me coming up, and they made it kind of easier for me to be able to make some moves because they kind of paved the road, and once they did that, we got started, and we never looked back.
And Fate Thomas started this team and brought Clint. I guess Clint had been the one of the co-captains on the '76 Olympic team, and he brought Clint to Nashville. And then you guys developed. What were some of the guys that were on that team?
We had Johnny Bumpus,
future world champion.
He later became champion. Mike McCallum later became champion, 3-time champion. We had a couple of other guys, Donald Bowles. We had the Sorrell brothers. We had a few other really good fighters. Lauren Ross came out of our program, and it was just at that time one of the most exciting programs that any city had ever seen before.
Yeah, and you personally had close to. How many amateur fights? Close to a couple hundred, right?
I had 205 amateur, and I won 193 of them. The 12 that I lost were the 12 that I learned how to win 193. So, and then I had 49 professional. So I don't count, or I try not to count, all of the ones I had in preparation for those fights. But I'm pretty blessed to be able to get through all of them and still be able to count.
Well, amen. But you were a multiple national champion, won national titles numerous times.
I won 5.
5 national championships, and then you fought in the Pan Am Games, fought in the Olympic trials in 1980.
Right.
So you basically, had all of this experience and met everybody possible in the sport.
I love the fact that the very first national title I won, they told me that I needed a passport. Well, I didn't know anything about any of that. I was just a kid from the projects. So the president of amateur boxing made sure he took care of all of that for me, and I got to do 39 international matches in 35 different countries as an amateur. So it was the most exciting time that I'd ever had in my life.
Yeah, you know, as you came up and you saw all of these guys, you know, of course, you were contemporary with Ray Leonard and his brother Roger. Most people don't know Roger because he didn't end up being a great pro like Ray.
Right.
But all of these great names, Clint Jackson, did you, in those days before they became great, did you see greatness in them? Or
I did. Guys like Bernard Taylor.
BT Express.
Yeah, you know, those guys were always guys that I looked up to because they fought a lot like I did or like I wanted to. And so I really emulated a lot of what they were doing because they had success doing it. So Frankie Randall and all those guys we were all coming up together. We were all learning how to win at the national and international level. So prior to the 80 Olympic Games, we felt pretty good about our chances of becoming gold medalists, especially after such a successful 76 Olympic team.
Well, you know, you mentioned Bernard Taylor and Frankie Randall. I saw Frankie Randall. He had won the Junior Olympics. I saw him at the Southern. You were probably there. When he was 16 years old, he lost to Bernard Taylor. And I remember, I remember when it was over, that he stood in the corner and was crying. He was like 16 years of age. We never dreamed that that 16-year-old kid would one day beat the great Julio Cesar Chavez and give him his first loss and become a great world champion himself.
I was there in Vegas when he did that, and I told him. He said to me before the fight, "What do you think my chances are?" I said, "If anybody can pull it off, it'll probably be you." He says, "I think so." And sure enough, he beat him.
He sure did. I mean, one of the all-time greats. I mean, he beat him. I mean, I don't think Don King was too happy about that. But you know.
I'm sure Julio wasn't very happy because he had, for the first time, been put on the mat. I'd never seen him on the mat, and of course Frankie put him down.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about some of the history from that Clint Jackson punching posse team, because Clint was a great fighter. I think when they all went to the 76 Olympics, it was Clint Jackson that was really the star. They weren't looking at Ray Leonard or
Howard Davis
or Howard Davis,
the Spinks brothers or anybody. Clint was he was by far the most established in terms of his ability to get the job done. He could make you go away if you made a mistake. He could hit you and they tell you what happened when they woke you up. So, you know, he was one of those kind of fighters. I just think that his life kind of spiraled when he decided that his career was over. He didn't know where he was going from there, and that happens a lot to a lot of guys.
Yeah, and of course you and I remember, but the public doesn't remember. After he had the fame and all of that, and later and all of that was gone, he basically took a man and tied him to a tree and held him for ransom.
Sure.
And is ending up spending life in prison today. And I think you told me earlier, it's been like 30 years he's been in prison.
He's been in now more than 30 years. And some years ago we wanted to check on him and try and see if there was anything we could do to help, because we didn't understand why he was in for so long. They gave him life, but I don't think life is more than 15 or 20 years. And he's been in for more than 30, and so we tried to petition to get him out, and only to find out he had no interest in getting out.
Now, of course, you were on the team with him, and there was Michael McCallum, and of course, Johnny Bumpus, and both of those guys ended up being world champions.
Right.
What did you think about, I mean, of course, Bumpus was a great boxer, real tall, you know, 6 foot tall, a southpaw, and the Duvas managed him, and he ended up becoming a world champion, and McCallum ended up being, I think, just a great champion.
3-time world champion.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, you guys were teammates and traveled the world with those guys.
In fact, Mike and I, both, Mike and Johnny, we're all still very good friends. Mike and I, we talk from time to time now, just to keep in touch with each other, just to make sure that we can kind of needle one another from time to time about what's happening in our careers, and he's working now with another world champion, and so I told him, just give me a minute. I'm working on it as well. And so we keep each other honest.
Now, where's Michael McCallum at these days?
He's in Las Vegas. He's working out of there. And he just had a fight of the fight on Showtime just this past weekend.
Okay. And then Bumpus went home to
Tacoma. He's in
Tacoma, Washington. And is he doing okay?
He doesn't get around quite as well as he one time did, but you know, he's still with us, and he's still conscious of who he is and that sort of thing. And you know, in this game, that's a blessing.
That's absolutely correct. And so back in those days, who did you think other than yourself was going to end up being, you know, having the most success out of that old punching posse team?
You know, I never doubted that McCallum would do well, because and of course nobody doubted that Clint Jackson wouldn't be champion. I mean, he could knock you out with either hand. So I mean, you just never ever thought he would not be champion, because I mean, I watched him put guys away with one shot. So I was always pretty clear in my mind that he would be a champion at one point in his career as a pro, and it just kind of never happened. And sometimes it becomes about circumstances. You're not in the right place at the right time. You're not with the right people. You know, it's a whole lot of variables that can turn it around for you, and it happens a lot. And so, you know, I think for Clint, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he stuck around in the amateurs too long.
Stay too long. And we'll pick up on that when we come back. Folks, stick around. We'll be back with Jerome Coffee after this short break. Hello, friend. I'm Kerry Farr, the host of In Your Corner. I want to ask you a question. Are you struggling with substance abuse, alcohol or drug addiction, or some other form of bondage that's got you tied down and won't let you go? Would you like to be set free, but you can't do it on your own? You need a little help? Well, I've got good news for you. In Your Corner Ministry spent 2 years developing a program called Addiction Knockout. Addiction Knockout is loaded with the tools that you need to be set free from the bondage of addiction. Addiction Knockout has a workbook, and it has 12 coaching videos that run for 12 weeks. We call it 12 rounds. And it also has 12 testimony videos of men and women just like you who have overcome this bondage of addiction. People are getting set free every day, and you can too with the tools that we have put together for you in Addiction Knockout. Addiction Knockout will help you identify the pain that caused you to start self-medicating in the first place. It will help you restore that broken spirit or that broken soul part of you that's been destroyed because of this addiction. It will help you also restore relationships with friends, family, neighbors. It will also help you find forgiveness for yourself and for those that you feel like have harmed you. My friend, I want you to have this program because I believe that it will help you. This program is something that you can go through yourself individually. You can take it and work right through the workbook, watch the videos, and go right through this program yourself. It's valued at $150. But my friend, today, for a gift of $97, we'll send Addiction Knockout to you. Go to addictionknockout.com and click on the products tab, and you'll find relief. You'll find something to help set you free there right now. Thank you, my friend. May the Lord bless you and help set you free today, I pray. Okay, folks, we're back with Jerome Kid Coffee, one of the great boxers from the 80s. Actually, you fought in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, didn't you, Jerome?
I did indeed. My professional career ended in Macau, China, and it was only because I had promised They told me Muhammad Ali, they were making it Muhammad Ali the fighter of the century. So it was 94, and I decided that I'd go over and do it because it was for Muhammad.
Yeah, and I was supposed to have been on that trip, and I took one of my fighters and put him somewhere else. So I'm sorry I missed that one. That was a great trip. But you know, Jerome, the beautiful thing, and of course I got to do it as a manager and trainer, not as a fighter, but you got to see the world.
That's what hooked me. When I won my first national title, the most exciting part of it for me was that they told me to get a passport. And I didn't, you know, what I was from the projects, a passport, what exactly is that? Sure enough, the president of amateur boxing got it for me, and I got to see the world, balling my fists up and winning.
Saw the world. And folks, don't pay any attention to the noise. We're not in the studio, we're in the boxing gym, the kickboxing gym, and a train just went by. Just to remind us that Jerome Coffee hit like a freight train.
That's right.
Jerome, I was at the 80 Olympic trials, and that was the year that Carter boycotted those, and I think you fought Richie Sandoval in the finals. I remember that.
Right.
But there was some, you know, at those trials, Marvis Frazier was there, the son of Joe Frazier. Marvis got stopped by James Broad,
Yeah.
and Broad won the championship.
Right.
Bumpus won that night.
Bernard Taylor.
Bernard Taylor
Jackie
won.
Beard, yeah.
Jackie Beard. Now there's another fighter that, you know, was a great amateur that did, and from here in Tennessee, but didn't go all the way as a pro.
Well, you know, the game has a way of eating you up at some point, and Jackie had a style that he was short, and he was effective with his ability, but he took some punishment, and in taking that punishment, it ultimately caught up with him. And so he wasn't able to get over the hurdle of becoming champ.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing that people don't understand. You and I were talking about this earlier. The reason that your career, I think, was so long, and we'll talk about you fighting for the world championship and all that in a minute, was because you were a great boxer. You and BT Express were great boxers. Now, the thing that I remember, and I've told you this earlier, was back in the day, you may remember the date, they brought in a guy here in Nashville on a Don Elbaum promoted show, and Elbaum started Don King out in the business. But they brought a guy in by the name of Freddie Pendleton. You didn't have a clue who he was. And you said, hey, who is this guy? And so you found out he was from Philly. And you said, I don't care what you guys are telling me. If this guy's from Philadelphia, I know he can fight.
That's a fact.
So tell us about, and he ended up being a world champion. And tell us about you beating him that night.
I remember that was the time of weighing in the morning of the fight, several hours before you actually get into the ring. I remember my opponent showing up. What they do is they say, oh, well, your opponent changed. It's a last minute kind of call on their parts, and they'll say, but we got a new guy for you. And I say, who is he? And they don't worry about it. You know, you're a great fighter. You don't bother with that. And
Elbaum's famous lines was, well, he walks straight in. You know, he comes straight forward. I remember, I've done business with him.
Yes, he told me it was going to be a walk in the park. And so sure enough, I said, so who is he? I want to know, because I'd heard about Don Elbaum, and I knew Don was like a lot of people in boxing. You know, they tell you one thing in one side of their mouths and another thing in the other side. And so I wanted to make sure that he was giving it to me straight. So I finally got him to tell me where he was from. When he said Philadelphia, I said, yeah, no, this guy can fight. He says, well, you know, he's 3-3 or 3-5, some crazy number. But the number was because every time he fought, he was fighting world-class fighters. That was the reason his record was so lopsided. And so, sure enough, I fought him, and it was my first 8-rounder, and I beat him. I picked up a cut in the 8th round. That was the one time that he hit me fairly clean, and opened up a 3-stitch cut. But I did win the fight, and sure enough, the very next year, at the same weight division that I fought him at, he knocked Roger Mayweather out for the world title.
Now tell the people who Roger Mayweather is.
Floyd Mayweather's uncle, the very first Mayweather to win fame in professional boxing, and was really a very good fighter. They call him the Black Mamba.
And Pendleton knocks him out, tells you how powerful this man is.
Yes.
And if you hadn't, it's a testament to how great of a boxer you are, because you didn't let him lay a glove on you until the 8th round.
8th round, he finally lands a shot. And, I remember thinking to myself, I'm just glad that that was the only shot that I got hit with that had any consequence.
Yeah.
So, I tried to stay very focused on hitting and not getting hit.
That's the name of the game for the real champs, right?
And that's what I try to teach even to the fighters I work with today.
And we'll talk about, how you've trained champion fighters even today. But you fought for the world championship yourself. And folks, I don't know if you know this, today a world championship fight is 12 rounds. Well, that's not the way they did it back in the day. Men fought men in those days,
right.
and it went 15 rounds,
15
right?
rounds.
And so that from round 12 to round 15 was what we call the championship rounds.
You better believe it.
You got on an airplane and flew all the way to Australia, overcame, you had to get acclimatized and all of that stuff, and in a short period of time, and fought Jeff Fennick, who was a very rugged champion. Tell us about that experience.
Well, they sent me a video of Jeff, and it was 8 minutes long, and it was every opponent that he had fought, because he knocked them all out before 8 minutes of a tape ran out, and I didn't know if they were trying to get inside my head or what, but sure enough, he was putting guys away left and right, and so I started looking at him and watching some of the things that he did and how he put guys away, and certainly I wasn't a guy that was going to be accessible to standing in a corner and letting him, just kind of.
Yeah, you weren't going to let him hit you.
No. If he hit me, he was going to get lucky.
He's going to have to earn it.
You can bank on it, and so sure enough, the fight went 15 rounds, and when the smoke settled, he was still standing, and he got the decision.
Yeah, but what was that like? Was that a great experience being there in Australia? And
it was. Australia was I had never been there as an amateur, so it was one of the first times that I got to be involved in that whole situation. And so when I got there, they were treating me very nicely, and I didn't know how to take that, because I knew that they couldn't have wanted me to win. So the first people that I wanted to meet when I got to that country were the Aborigines.
Yeah.
And they invited me to the gym, and I spent some time with them, did some autograph signing and that sort of thing, and they tried to introduce me to their style of eating. I was getting ready for a fight, so I couldn't try anything new at the time. But that was a fun time for me. It was very educational, and then of course the fight was a fight that I knew it was going to be tough. Jeff had knocked everybody out before me, so I knew that
again shows what a great boxer you were.
Yeah, he was going. I knew he was going to try to add me to that list, and of course it was my job to not only not allow that, but to try to do it to him. And so, he was a tough fighter. He was gallant. He was brave. He was a willing guy, and I was fighting him in his backyard. So it was going to be very difficult to get out of there with a decision.
Well, you also, came up at the same time. Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, all Mike McCallum, Johnny Bumpus, all of those great fighters. Who do you think, in your mind, in your era, 70s, 80s, 90s, who was the greatest fighter that you saw, pound per pound?
I gotta think the guy that inspired me the most was Ray Leonard. Ray was thinking out of the box when I was 16 years old. He's a couple years older than I was, but Ray was already over the top. He was thinking about things that I never ever thought about until I got in that circle and started to see how they were training, how they were preparing, and once I got involved in that circle, I became a better fighter just by being in that circle.
Being around that group.
Yeah.
What about, let's do, what if? What if, Floyd Mayweather Jr. fought Ray Leonard in their prime? Now, I have my thoughts on that. I want to hear yours.
Well, you know what? In that what if, it almost happened because he fought Floyd Mayweather Sr.
I saw that fight.
And what happened in that fight?
And they were very similar, weren't they?
The daddy taught the son.
Yeah.
So the shoulder roll and all that stuff, it didn't work against Ray then, and it wouldn't work against Ray now.
Now, I agree with you totally, my friend. Let me ask you this. Are you a man of faith?
I am indeed.
Yeah.
I've had to talk to God between rounds.
You had to talk to God between rounds.
That's right.
But there's been a time in your life when you've given your life to Jesus Christ.
I have indeed.
And we've only got about a minute and a half left, Jerome. We got a minute left. I wanted to ask you, you've trained, Scotty Olson, who ended up being a world champion. Close us out and tell us a little bit about, what you're doing today and what you've been doing over the last few years.
Well, I've been very blessed that when I left the competitive part of boxing, that I was able to start training fighters and stay in the field of boxing that kept me alive. And so I think my sanity has been because I've been able to stay a part of this. And so I'm working with some young kids now, 11, 12-year-olds, and they're hungry. They have the desire for the game, and because of that, it's kept me very blessed, very, very happy with what I'm doing and who I am, and the direction that I've taken at this point in my life.
And Jerome, if somebody wanted to connect with you, maybe somebody from your past sees this on television, how would they find you? They would
go on the internet, and they would Google me, and they would see the places. They'd find my email. They'd find information on Facebook or whatever, and they'd reach out to me, and I'd reach right back out to them.
Well, Jerome "Kid" Coffee, man, I can't tell you what an honor and a privilege it is for me to have you on In Your Corner and catch up with you after I haven't seen you in 20 years. Thank you so much for joining us today on In Your Corner.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Friends, thank you for watching the program today. I hope it encouraged you as much as it did me. Jerome was one of those guys that didn't get knocked down. But I want to tell you, if you get knocked down, if you'll dust yourself off and get up and keep fighting, you might have to fight a couple more rounds, but if you'll keep fighting, you'll be victorious and you'll be a champion. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week on the next edition of In Your Corner.